He began the most famous philosophical essay of the 20th century with a sentence that no philosophy department in the world would have permitted a student to write. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Not what is the nature of being, not how do we know what we know, not any of the technical, carefully bounded questions that academic philosophy had spent centuries organizing itself around. The only serious philosophical problem is suicide, meaning the only question that actually matters, the only question whose answer has genuine stakes, the only question that a philosophy must answer before it earns the right to answer anything else, is whether life is worth living. Albert Camus wrote that sentence in 1942 in occupied France while working for the French resistance, at 30 years old, with tuberculosis, with the war, with the specific weight of a century that had produced 2 world wars, in the camps, in the systematic industrial application of human intelligence to the project of human destruction. He was not asking the question from a seminar room. He was asking it from inside the darkest available evidence, from the place where the honest answer was genuinely unclear. And his answer, arrived at through one of the most rigorous, most honest, most philosophically demanding arguments of the modern era, was not what you expect. It was not, yes, life is worth living because of meaning, because of God, because of progress, because of love, because of any of the systems of thought that human beings construct to make the question feel answered. It was, yes, despite the fact that none of those systems actually answer it, despite the fact that the universe is indifferent to the question, despite the fact that the silence that meets every demand for meaning is complete. Yes, anyway. Fully, without pretending the absurdity isn't there. This is the philosophy of Albert Camus, and it may be the most honest, most livable, most urgently needed philosophy of the 21st century. There is a specific experience that most people in midlife have had, and that almost no one talks about with complete honesty. The experience of having done everything correctly, having followed the map, the career, the relationships, the accumulation of the markers that the culture designates as evidence that a life is going well, and arriving at a moment, somewhere in the middle of it, when the map and the territory stop matching. Not dramatically, not with the clean rupture of a crisis that everyone can see, quietly, in the ordinary texture of a Tuesday afternoon, in a life that looks fine from the outside, in the middle of the work or the dinner or the evening that is exactly what you planned it to be, a silence, an absence, the specific, nameless, completely unwelcome sense that the story you have been telling about why this all matters has stopped being convincing. The philosophers have a word for this. Camus had a word for it. The absurd. Not absurd in the colloquial sense, ridiculous, comic, slightly silly. The absurd as a philosophical condition. The collision between the human need for meaning, which is real, which is structural, which is not something you can philosophize yourself out of, and the universe's complete, permanent, utterly unmalicious silence in response to that need. The universe does not hate us, it is not cruel, it is simply indifferent, and the human being, who cannot stop asking why, who needs the answer in a way that food and shelter cannot satisfy, stands in front of that indifference every day. Camus said, this is the situation, this is what is actually true, and now, what do you do with it? Albert Camus was born in 1913 in Mondovi, Algeria, then a French colonial territory, in circumstances as far from the Parisian intellectual world he would eventually inhabit as it is possible to be. His father died in World War I when Camus was less than a year old. His mother was illiterate, partially deaf, worked as a cleaning woman. They lived in a two-room apartment in Algiers with no electricity and no running water, with a grandmother who ruled the household with an iron practicality that left no room for sentiment. Camus was brilliant from childhood. His teacher, Louis Germain, recognized it and fought for him to receive a scholarship to the Lycée against the family's practical need for him to work. He arrived at the University of Algiers intending to become a professor of philosophy. Tuberculosis ended that. The university would not certify a candidate with his medical history for teaching. Everything he became from the margins of the institutions that should have received him. The scholarship boy from the working-class apartment, the colonial subject who became the most important French writer of his generation, the man who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1957 and gave a speech thanking Louis Germain, his teacher, not the institutions, the person. He died in a car accident in 1960. He was 46 years old. There was an unused train ticket in his pocket. He had changed his travel plans at the last minute to ride with his publisher instead. The unused ticket, the last-minute change, the particular, pointless, completely meaningless way that one of the greatest minds of the century simply stopped. If Camus had designed his own death to illustrate his philosophy, he could not have done it more precisely. The myth of Sisyphus, the essay that begins with the suicide question, is built around a figure from Greek mythology that most of us learned about in school and have been misremembering ever since. Sisyphus, in the myth, was punished by the gods for cheating death, for escaping the underworld through cleverness, for refusing to accept the mortality that the gods had assigned him. His punishment was to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, and every time he neared the top, every time the effort was almost complete, the boulder rolled back down. This is the image Camus chose as the central metaphor for human existence, not because he was a pessimist, because he was the opposite of one, a man who looked at the most honest possible account of the human situation and refused to flinch from it, and then asked what happens next. He writes, and this is the sentence that has followed him through history, the one that lands differently every time you read it, depending on where you are in the story of your own life. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not, Sisyphus has found a way to make the boulder lighter. Not, Sisyphus has discovered that the rolling is actually meaningful when you look at it correctly. Not any of the therapeutic reframings that the modern world would apply to a situation. The boulder is heavy. The hill is real. The descent after each failed summit, the walk back down to begin again, happens every time. The gods are not going to relent. The situation is what it is. In Sisyphus, on the walk back down, in the moment between one failed summit and the next beginning, is happy. Not despite the rock, not by finding a way to pretend the rock doesn't exist, in full, clear-eyed, completely honest possession of the reality of the rock, happy. The key to understanding what Camus means by this and what he is offering that is genuinely different from every other answer to the suicide question is the walk down. Most philosophical traditions locate meaning in the upward movement, in achievement, in progress, in the accumulation of a summit reached and held. The boulder going up, that is where the significance lives, where the effort is justified, where the story of a purposeful life is being written. Camus locates meaning in the walk down. In the moment after the failure, before the new beginning, when Sisyphus has the boulder and its weight, and the hill and its truth completely in view, when nothing is obscured by effort or hope or the forward momentum that keeps the human being from seeing its actual situation clearly, in that moment, Camus says, Sisyphus is most completely himself, most completely alive, most fully in possession of the one thing that the gods, with all their power, could not take from him: his relationship to his own existence, His yes, uncoerced by hope, unsubsidized by illusion, given freely to a life that has made no promises and kept them all. Camus makes a distinction, the most important one in his entire philosophy, between what he calls philosophical suicide and the revolt he is advocating. Philosophical suicide is what happens when a person, confronted with the absurd, jumps, not literally, but philosophically, chooses a system of meaning, religious, ideological, therapeutic, that resolves the tension by declaring that the silence is not really silence, that the universe is not really indifferent, that there is a God who answers, a progress that redeems, a therapy that heals the specific wound of being a conscious creature in an unconscious universe. Camus is not attacking religious faith or political commitment or therapy. He is identifying a particular move, the move that takes the absurd seriously for a moment and then escapes it, that acknowledges the silence and then fills it with whatever is available, rather than living inside it with open eyes. The revolt he advocates is different. It is the choice to remain in the tension, to hold the absurd fully, to keep the silence in view, to refuse the leap into premature resolution, to maintain the complete, honest awareness that the universe has not answered and will not answer, and to say yes to the life anyway. Not a diminished yes, not a resigned yes, not the yes of a person who has decided that this is all there is and one might as well make the best of it. The defiant, clear-eyed, fully inhabited yes of a person who has looked at the honest terms, the boulder, the hill, the descent, the beginning again, and chosen with complete awareness of what is being chosen, to push. Now the bridge. Because Camus was writing in occupied France, from inside a historical darkness that most of us are not inhabiting, but the structure of his question, the collision between the need for meaning and the silence that meets it, is not historically located. It is the experience of the Tuesday afternoon, the dinner that is exactly what you planned, the life that looks fine and feels, in moments of complete honesty, like it is missing the thing whose absence it cannot name. Most of us, when this feeling arrives, do one of two things. We fill the silence with activity, with consumption, with the next goal that will surely produce the sense of meaning that the last goal failed to produce, with the philosophical suicide that Camus named, the leap into a system that promises to resolve the tension rather than living inside it honestly. Or we conclude that the silence means something is wrong with us, that other people do not feel this, that the properly assembled, correctly functioning human being does not sit in the middle of a perfectly good life and feel, inexplicably, the specific hollowness of a question that has not been answered. Camus says, neither. The silence is real. The need is real. The collision between them is not evidence of malfunction. It is evidence of consciousness, of being fully, honestly, completely awake to the actual situation, which is the precondition for the only kind of happiness that is not borrowed against a debt that will come due. Here is what Albert Camus asks of you, practically, today. First, stop filling the silence. Once today, once with intention, sit with the absence of resolution, the question that has not been answered, the meaning that the universe has not supplied. Do not reach for the phone or the next task or the system that promises to resolve the tension. Just the silence, for 5 minutes, without the leap. Notice what is present in the not filling. Not comfort. Camus does not promise comfort, but the specific, clarifying quality of a person who is seeing their situation exactly as it is, without the borrowed light of a resolution that is not actually arrived. That clarity, that honest, undefended, wide-awake relationship to your own existence is the beginning of the Camusian yes. Second, find your boulder. Sisyphus is happy not in spite of his boulder, but in relationship to it. The specific, concrete, fully known weight of the thing he has been assigned, the hill, the rock, the particular labor that is his and not another's, is the substance of his existence, not an obstacle to it. What is your boulder? Not metaphorically, specifically. The work, the relationship, the daily effort that recurs without guarantee of a permanent summit. The thing you push not because you have been promised it will stay at the top, but because the pushing is what is yours to do. Name it, and then push it today. Not toward a summit, not with the hope that this time it will stay, with the full, honest, Sisyphean awareness that it is your boulder, your hill, your hands, your completely unreasonable and completely genuine yes. Third, practice the walk down. The walk down is where Camus locates everything. The moment of failure, before the new beginning, when the boulder and the hill are in full, unobscured view. Identify a recent failure, a summit that did not hold, an effort that did not produce the outcome it was aimed at, and instead of rushing to the next push, walk down slowly. Stay in the descent. Look at the boulder. Look at the hill. Look at the distance between where you are and where you will begin again. Not to despair, to see, to be for a moment in complete and honest possession of your actual situation, which is the only position from which the genuine yes, rather than the performed one, can be given. Fourth, write the sentence. Camus wrote the most honest sentence available to him. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and then answered it, from inside the evidence, without the leap. Write your version, not his sentence, yours. The most honest thing you can say about where you are in the story of your own life. Not the version edited for palatability, not the version that has the silver lining built in. The sentence that sees the boulder and the hill and the descent, and then, from inside that complete and honest seeing, says yes anyway. In your specific words, to your specific life, without pretending it isn't absurd. That sentence, written honestly, without the leap, is the myth of Sisyphus, and you are its author. I want to close with the image of Camus at the end of his life, not the car accident, not the UNOS train ticket in the pointless, meaningless, perfectly illustrative way he died. The image of him 2 years before. He has won the Nobel Prize. He is the most celebrated writer in France and one of the most celebrated in the world. He is 44 years old. And he goes to Stockholm to accept the prize. And in his acceptance speech, which he could have used to summarize his philosophy, to explain the absurd, to receive the honor in the manner that Nobel laureates are expected to receive it, he talks about his teacher, Louis Germain, the man who saw a brilliant child in a 2-room apartment in Algiers and fought for him to have access to the education that the world had not assigned him, who pushed, without guarantee of outcome, a boulder that did not belong to him, up a hill that had no particular reason to receive it. Camus wrote to Germain, privately, before the ceremony, "Without you, without the affectionate hand you extended to the small poor child that I was, without your teaching and your example, none of this would have happened." The most celebrated philosopher of the absurd, the man who had spent his career arguing that the universe offers no meaning and that we must live fully anyway, was in the most important moment of his public life expressing gratitude. Not to the universe, not to fate, not to any system that promised meaning and delivered it, to a person who had simply shown up and paid attention and extended an affectionate hand. The boulder pushed. The summit briefly held. One must imagine Sisyphus grateful.
Here is the question Camus leaves us with today. Not from the seminar room, from the walk down, from the specific, honest, completely unresolved moment between one failed summit and the next beginning. Can you say yes to the life, your specific, actual Boulder and hell, Tuesday afternoon, no guarantees life, without pretending it is other than it is? Not a diminished yes, not a resigned yes, the defiant, clear-eyed, fully inhabited yes of a person who has looked at the honest terms. Here is the question Camus leaves us with today. Not from the seminar room, from the walk down, from the specific, honest, completely unresolved moment between one failed summit and the next beginning. Can you say yes to the life, your specific, actual Boulder and hell, Tuesday afternoon, no guarantees life, without pretending it is other than it is? Not a diminished yes, not a resigned yes, the defiant, clear-eyed, fully inhabited yes of a person who has looked at the honest terms and chosen to push anyway. Leave that in the comments, because that answer, your Camusian, honest, unleaped answer, is not a small thing. It is the boulder, and the hill, and the walk back down, and the beginning again. I'll see you in the next one.